Okie dokie. So this is clip number 3 of my, what I'm calling geopolitics and the balance of payments. So as I was saying, the IMF, which was the second pillar of this 3-pillar system that they set up after World War II to put the whole world economy sort of back together, was this balance of payments crisis. See, basically, here's the thing, what's going on. And it's all pertaining to fixed exchange rates again. Basically, the way this works is if you have a fixed exchange rate and you are a good country and you actually maintain your fixed exchange rate, in other words, you're not lying to the rest of us, you're keeping your promises. You said you would fix your exchange rate at, let's say, $1.50 Canadian equals $1 US, and it's pretty much staying that today, tomorrow, and the next day, then we're pretty happy. We're happy campers. The problem is what happens if people think that the government is not going to be capable of maintaining this fixed exchange rate. Right? Take the example of a large balance of payments deficit. Now remember, the term balance of payments deficit is when we're looking at just the current and capital accounts. Right? This is basically, we have that supply curve, that demand curve for foreign exchange, right? So the upward supply curve, downward demand curve. And we're looking at the situation below the equilibrium. So in other words, this would be sort of conceptually like the price ceiling scenario. So we have that horizontal line and it's below the equilibrium. Okay? So that price ceiling scenario. That's that balance of payments deficit. Remember what that means. There is a supply and demand, and there's a huge excess demand for foreign exchange. See, what's probably happening is people are saying, yeah, this country is maybe going to get into some trouble. I want to get my money out of the country. So there's this huge demand for foreign exchange. So I can take my currency that I have in this country that looks a little iffy. I want to get my money out. Give me some euros, a more stable currency, stronger currency. I don't want your rinky-dink currency for your country. I want a better currency. So what's happening, of course, is that with that huge balance of payments deficit, and everyone's demanding foreign exchange, well, where's all that excess demand for foreign exchange? How's it going to be satisfied? Central bank has to supply it all. It has to fill the gap. In other words, it has to drain down its foreign exchange reserves. Well, the problem is if the country is continuously running balance of payments deficits, it would then because it's in this fixed exchange rate system, what does the government the central bank have to keep doing? It has to keep supplying foreign exchange reserves. Okay? Now remember what we're talking about here. Central bank's got a whole bunch of foreign currency sitting in its vault. If every month it's draining down its reserve, at some point the reserve's going to go to zero. That's why they call it a crisis, because now the country's run out of reserves. And then, of course, the fixed exchange rate regime can no longer hold. And so now this creates problems. So basically, the idea of the IMF was to have the members give contributions. So all the different member countries would contribute to this sort of international pool of funds so that they could then help out countries having balance of payments crises to sort of prevent the whole fixed exchange rate system from imploding. Right? So in other words, they could then lend the funds to that country so that they could not run out of their foreign exchange. Or at least not as fast. Okay, so that was the second pillar. So we got IMF, all about fixed exchange rates and balance of payments, official financing stuff. General agreement on tariffs and trade. Well, that's your tariffs, quotas, and free trade stuff. That graph with the 1, 2, 3, and 4, the shaded regions and all the distortions. And of course, the third pillar is the World Bank. And well, banking, of course, is about loaning out money, and that's what I'm covering in chapter 18, which is like the next thing after this. So you can kind of see how balance of payments, free trade, tariffs, quotas, and banking are really the big key issues that these people who are setting up this world order, this financial economic order, we're all concerned about. So that's why they're so important. Now, of course, it was also, you see, it also had political implications. Like, for instance, it wasn't so much about, I mean, there was, of course, the issue of stability, but it was also about hegemony, right? For instance, he mentions in his book that, for instance, like the IMF and the World Bank pretty much are all controlled by the Americans and the British. So there is some of that sort of power. You can control all these systems, and you have control over lots of other countries. Okay, so that pretty much covers point number 1. Is that why is it important to know balance of payments, free trade, tariffs, quotas, and banking systems, and loaning out money, and fixed exchange rates, and all that stuff, is because, well, this is what all the people, the big important people that, making big important decisions were very worried about. So you need to know it too. So that's basically that. The second thing that he talked about, let's see what he talks about here. Yeah, okay, so he talks about that European redevelopment. He also makes sort of a point, kind of interesting, is that it's actually during the post-World War II period. So this is like the early 1950s. Okay, but way back then. I know. That a lot of what was happening in New York City, the Manhattan area, was a lot of these banks were merging. Okay, that's another topic in your textbook. I think it's in chapter 5, merging. This is, you have different types like horizontal mergers, vertical mergers, and so on. But if you have bank merging with another bank, this would be called a horizontal merger. Right? A vertical merger would be something like General Motors, which makes cars, buying a steel company. Right? It's going sort of backwards and buying a steel company, because steel then is sold to the car company to make the car. Right? So that's vertical. Horizontal is when you have sort of it would be like General Motors buying Ford. It's car company buying car company within the same industry. Well, that's what's going on here. We have banks buying and merging with other banks, and that's where this is actually like where you had the emergence of things like Citibank. Basically emerged out of this, and there were some other ones like the Chase Bank and the Manhattan Bank got together and formed Chase Manhattan kind of thing. So this is actually very important, because what ended up happening here is that these few New York banks pretty much got a lot of the deposits, which is that banking topic, right? Those checkable deposits were all concentrated. That's sort of a microeconomics term. When an industry is controlled only by a few firms, they control everything. So we say it's a concentrated industry, and that's what they created. So that was also another sort of interesting development. And part of the reason was because a lot of these big American oil companies, the Big Five as they called them, were making a lot of money at this time. So you had sort of the big banks and the big oil were sort of in bed with each other. And so that's part of the reason why they were merging at the time. So I'm going to come back, number 4. I'm going to talk a little bit about Iranian 1950s economic history. Cool subject.